Kumla and a black Gemara. Today's daf is daf Nun Beis Amid Aleph. Thursday's Gemara. We learned in the Mishnah four different ways one can relate to Yevamos, two from the Torah, two from the Rabbanon. One is Yibum, obviously, Beila, that's getting married, and that's Ma'atayda. Then there's Chalitza, where you basically release her from any bonds that you have, and then there's two Midrabanan. One is Maimed, if you go ahead and you make the overture of Kedushin, and one is giving her a get. And then in the Mishnah begins that the Malil says there's no get after a get. If you replicate the same activity, you can't repeat it twice. The second one has no effect. And we explained yesterday as to why that is so. Rabbi had Abaye's view and Rabba's view. And then we had the Rabbanan who disagree. They say that there is a get after a get and so on. Then the Mishnah gives us three different Ketzad. The Mishnah talks about a single Yavam and a single Yevama, where you go through these four different things. You do two of them, and you do, let's say, a Chalitza, and then you do a get, you do a get, you do a Chalitza, and all the different scenarios. Then we talk about a case where you have one Yavam, one brother with two, Reuben was married to two women, so two Yevamas. And then we have two Yavams, like Shimon and Levi, two brothers, and there's only one Yevama. And each brother decides to give a maimer or a get in all the four different scenarios that we had. So when the Mishnah finishes talking in the first part of Machlekes Gavar and Amnun Chachamim, if there's a get after a get and there's a mimer after a mimer, no, you repeat the same exercise, the Mishnah then says Ketzad. Usually when it says Ketzad, the Mishnah is about to delineate what we just said. But yet, in examples that the Mishnah gives in the Ketzad, none of them are similar to the beginning of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says of Ketzad, it gives you actually different examples altogether, where you vary, not where you replicate the same kind of relationship, but you actually vary it. You do one Chalitza, the next one you do is a Yibum, and so on and so forth. Like the Mishnah says, you made a Maimer in the Yevama, and then you gave her a get. That isn't what Ramon Chacham were talking about. So says the Gemara. Hi get to this is a get after get. You give us examples of totally different things where you varied. This is how we say it. Get get. This is how you're supposed to learn the Mishnah. Get get kid but so that is obvious. We don't have to give examples. What about Yavam Echad v'Yavama Achas? What happens? You have one brother, Shimon, and Reuben passed away and left one wife, Leah. And now we're going to give examples about that. Ketzad Hatarasim. How exactly does she become mutter? So then we go through all different scenarios. So, for example, also Maimed b'Yevemto, you gave her a Maimed, so you then v'nosan la get, and then you gave her a get. So the get removes a minder. You can no longer marry, as we said in the Mishnah, because you already the bias, because you already demonstrated you're interested in living with her, because you gave her a get. So therefore, the case is referring to a new case. We're talking about a single yavam and a single yavama, and he does two different activities, and sometimes a conflicting activities. So what do we do from here on in? So then we're going to go through the entire Mishnah and explain part by part. Says the Gemara, also Maimer ball. If he gave her Maimer to her Kedushin, and then he went ahead and he lived with her, that's the correct way. So the question, obviously, so what did he do wrong? So first of all, in fact, it seems the Mishnah supported Ravuna. Ravuna actually said that the format of Yibum is not just to have beer, but to go through the two-stage process like any other marriage. Mitzvah Yevama, the correct way of doing Yevama is Mekadosh v'Achar. First you have Kedushin like any other woman, and then you have Bila like any other woman. So the Mishnah supports that. Not everyone agrees. The Ema, we can say is no support. The Mishnah is saying this is also tolerated if you go through the two steps, but you don't have to. You can only go through. You only can do Bila. You're already Yitzah. So if you go through two steps, why should it be any worse if you just did Bia? He said no. I would have thought that actually the way maybe it's worse. Since we said that since we learned that if somebody goes ahead and does a mimer with his Yevama, is parche meno zikas yevamim. You took away the zika of the yibum. Now that you did a maimer, and therefore you're treating her like an ordinary woman. You took away the zika, the bond that existed, the chalal of it, and they were transformed into an ordinary marriage. Zika's aid in the suyin. Now what you're going ahead is aid in the suyin. Ema, I would have thought, so if you do it this way, la mitzvah kav, you're not doing it the correct way. You took away the mitzvah yibum. The mitzvah yibum should be the mitzvah yibum. What you did all by doing a maimer, you did make it worse, because now you just converted it into an ordinary marriage, and you took away the mitzvah yibum. Mashlan, that's good enough. Gufa, that's not what we said. When the mitzvah night, there should be two stages, and then the ball. But if you did the other way around, you did the bila, which is the mitzvah from the Torah, and then the asamayim, afterwards you went ahead and you gave her kedushin kana, you are kaina. The obvious question is, once you did bila, it's already your wife. So what? Just because you did kedushin afterwards doesn't detract from what you did. In ball, the asamayim pshitim. So kind of you're really kind with beer. Ela say that in ball, this is how you're supposed to read it. In ball, below maimed. If you did be without any maimed, kana you are kind of. Well, even though we say that two stages, if you did two stages, but if you did only one stage, you're also kind. Says the Gemara, but Tanya, we learned elsewhere like that you get malchus. Malchus means that it's actually forbidden the Torah, and it sounds like you should not just do beer. Actually, you should go through the two stages of tradition, and then afterwards you should do beer. So the price that says like say that it's wrong just to do beer. How can you say beer alone is kind of? So the Gemara like which you would connote east of the Torah, but actually it's makas mardus midrabanan. It is only makas mardus. It's only makas because you should be a rebel, and then it should discipline you, and therefore it's only a midrabanan. But matayda bila alone is enough. What's that all about? The Rav Menaged, Rav used to give lashes to the following people. Number one, man the mekadesh bebiyah. If somebody decides to marry someone biblically and dismiss and bypass the kedushin, which matayda you are married, but you give them malchus because it's not tznius. Man the mekadesh b'shuk. If somebody publicly proposes to a woman, that's not tznius, and he would give them lashes. Somebody proposes to a woman, doesn't even have any discussion with her prior, just goes ahead and proposes her again. It's I guess it's not tznius as well. Somebody sends a get to his wife through a shliach, and then afterwards he goes to a bezin before the shliach got there and cancels the get. The problem of that is, even though the halach is that the machlek is, the halach is that the bittul doesn't work, the problem is that that people don't know, and they think that he canceled the get, and it's clear. First of all, she doesn't know. The reason why we have a problem, the whole thing is she doesn't know. She'll go ahead and get married, and it'll turn out that her children will be mamzerim. So therefore, we decided that he cannot be mvatel, but not everyone knows that as well, and therefore people are going to start casting aspersions at her children, accusing her of being a married woman. If somebody says, I'm giving a get to my wife, but then privately tells two witnesses, I want you to know that I'm forced into it, I'm coerced, and my get is not valid. And even though the bezin will say, let's remove that before we go ahead, we say, all these maidos that you gave before should be canceled and annulled, and he agrees. Nevertheless, people are not aware, and they'll start spreading rumors about the children. Somebody who antagonizes the shliach of a bezin, that's Rashi's version. Teizer holds any rabbi who sends a shliach to send a message to somebody and he's antagonized, they would give lashes to the person who antagonized the shliach of a rabbi. Somebody was put into excommunication for 30 days and did nothing about it, didn't even care, didn't try to amend or whatever, had to go to the bezin and say, how can I remove this shamta, this cherem? Then went to bezin to demand to remove it. The other one is chasna, the first son-in-law, the first son-in-law who lives in the house of his in-laws, which is a problem because we think that there's a possibility the mother-in-law and the son-in-law might have some kind of a relationship. So therefore it's not healthy. And you would give lashes to such a couple. Says the only if the oldest son-in-law lives in the house. Now they just walk by the house. There was somebody, an incident, somebody walked by the house of his father-in-law. The Nog gave him 39 lashes just for walking in front of the house of his in-laws. That story is unique because made them have a time. Once everybody knew, everybody was talking that there was some kind of affair going on, and therefore he shouldn't even have walked over there. The Doy says, Doy says, in all these instances, Rab would not give the lashes. The only one who would give lashes to none of these, only if somebody was decided to bypass the ordinary kedusha and went straight to bia, and furthermore didn't even discuss with her, just went ahead straight ahead with it. Or ikadami, I feel we should look inami. Even if we did discuss with her, but this is a brazen act, and it's not sneezik. Tell me, we learned. Kates and Maimon, we talk about Maimon, there's whole Masechta, we're already 50 blocks into Masechta. What exactly is Maimon? Not like as a give her money or something equivalent to Bishtar or a contract. What's a contract? Kates and Bishtar. Kates a Kidamon. The way you normally write a shtar when you marry a woman. It says, Kosel on your writes on a piece of paper, on the clay. Alpha Pish, the clay is not with the Pruta. Hare Atmukadeshli, you're engaged to me. And here you're right, engaged to me as a Yevama. What's the big deal? I want to buy a halakam. This is what he meant. Shtar Ksul is Yevami Kates. You also have to write a ksuba. When it comes to Yevama, how do you write a ksuba? Because whose estate has to cover the ksuba? Her original husband or the second husband? Kosla, he writes, I'm not playing about playing the Kabila Yas, playing the event. I took upon myself to marry the Yevama. Laws of the founders of Karo and to feed her and take care of her, provide for her. But the ksuba comes off the first husband's assets. Lesla Merishan, and if the first husband doesn't have any assets, that's Kilaban Mishani. Then Shimon, the brother-in-law, has to then pay her out of ksuba. It shouldn't be easy to divorce her because he knows that at a whim, but rather he knows that it'll come at a heavy cost, and therefore he'll think twice. But I have a question. Nosan lo get. If he gave her a get, he said, what if he gave her a get which was not really valid by Yisrael, but he gave her a get. He said to her, you divorced from me, on the other hand, you're not free to marry anybody else. Now, such a get is not really a valid get at all. Of get means there's no strings attached. Here, there's a lot of strings attached. Mao, what's it in? Do we say, get Yevama the Rabban, buy Yevama the holiday you get? If you get a get Yevama, tell me the Rabban, I tell you, nothing happened because you have to marry or give her chalitza. Tell me the Rabban, but what do you achieve? Then nobody else can marry her because you've demonstrated I should leave the bais and instead of marrying her. But you have to only give a chalitza. But this get here, does it count or doesn't count at all? So the question is the following. Do we say get Yevama the Rabban, get the Mahani Beishlish, Mahani? Only a valid get. That her works by an ordinary married woman who work here. Yivam get lemani beishlish lemani bivama, but if that get which is valid doesn't work here at all. Ideal osil because we might make a mistake. They don't understand the nuances. They see this get and they'll think, a get by Yivama has no bearing. Amalei answered him, Chashin, we are worried. Dilma osil achlufi b'kitiv. We are worried that maybe they will swap it for. They'll think that a get doesn't do anything, and therefore we decided that even such a get should still have some credibility, or at least have some effect on a Yevama. Says the Gemara, Maskiv Rabbi Bachon, let me ask according to this. You tell me it's going through emotions is already a problem. What happened? He gave her a piece of paper with nothing written on it. Or he gave her a paper wrote, you're divorced. But it's a piece of paper which definitely is not a valid get. Does that mean that she can, as a Yevama, the get has the bearing and therefore she can no longer marry the brother-in-law? Only chalitza will do. Amalei said, what are you comparing? There, a piece of paper has no validity at all. However, if you say to her, if a kohen would give his wife a get saying you divorced from me but cannot live with anybody else, that's called a reach get. It smells like a get, even though it's not a get. So, of course, she's not divorced yet, but she can no longer live with her husband, the kohen. How do we learn? A woman who's divorced from a husband, you should not take. Well, what's the emphasis from a husband? Who else would she be divorced from? So the pasuk is teaching you that sometimes, even though the only person that she's divorced from is her husband, because he said clearly, you're not divorced to anybody else, and nevertheless she's forbidden to go. That's called the reach get. It smells like get. Which what passes the kuna? An argument whether it's from the Torah or the Rabban. From the Rishonim. Amru, he said, somebody says to a scribe, because of get larusasi, I want a very strange thing. I want you to write a get to my betrothed. The moment I marry her, the get should immediately take effect. So why actually marrying her? So the Rosh have actually said that if you go through Tanoim, you have a proper Tanoim engagement, you cannot get divorced. There's no real not Eidus and B'Tanaim. So therefore, some people would go ahead and get married in order then to be able to divorce. Otherwise, how do you sever the ties? Because you didn't really have a kedushin, and yet a Tanaim is something very, very significant. So maybe that's the case. So he said here, write a get to the woman that I got engaged, that as soon as I marry her, this get should be valid to divorce. Haray's a get, it's a valid get, but they should be Yod L'Gavshin, has the ability to divorce them now, because they're already engaged. You can divorce them now, so therefore the get is valid. Even though we have a rule of a get yoshin means that if you write a get and the next day you live with your wife, that get should no longer be used. So how can you use this get? So Tais already says, and Rashi says here, that you're not allowed to use a get, but if you did, it's a valid get. Another answer to Tais is that since here you clearly said, I don't want this get to be valid until after we get married, so it's clear that the get doesn't really take effect till then, it's not considered a get yoshin. So it says the Gemara, an ordinary woman ain't get. If you, let's say, meet a strange woman, and if you didn't even get engaged to her, and you write a get and you say that this get should become valid so they marry her, ain't be other guy, you have no, since you have no ability to divorce right now, she's not your wife, not even engaged to you. So that get is no good. But in the case where you're engaged already, then the get is valid. Taisha says this is only talking about according to one that says that a dovish le'ba'olam, something that happened yet, it's not valid. But according to one that holds that other makna dovish le'ba'olam, that you can actually transact with something that hasn't yet existed, that you say it shouldn't happen until after it comes to existence, it's valid. And here it's the same thing. But why are we talking about this? Because this leads to the question of Rami Bachama. What about the same thing? Shimon is about to marry a sister-in-law, so he writes the get and he says, as soon as I marry her, this get should be valid. How do we deal with a sister-in-law? On the one hand, it's sort of attached already, it's like you're engaged, so maybe it's valid. On the other hand, you don't really have the power to give her a get. The get does not sever your tie, so therefore there's no potential to give a get right now. So in this case, maybe the get is not valid. Since you're attached to each other as if you're engaged already, or maybe because you didn't do a minor, and therefore it's not possible for you to give a get right now. So therefore there's no migui, there's nothing, has no validity. Like take, where's the question? Talking about question about Yibum, you have another question. Boy, Rav Chananya. Rav Chananya asked the question as follows: Kosa, he wrote get. Lazikosa. What happened? He wrote a get. Let's say he gave a mimer. So Shimon, Reuben died, left his wife Leah, and Shimon goes ahead and gives her a mimer, right? Kiddush. And we learned before that if he gave a get, the get cancels the mimer, but you can no longer get married anymore because you're already demonstrating an interest, so you have to give her chalitza. So what happens? Kosav get lazikosa. You wrote a get, but you said, I want that this get should not remove the mimer I gave her, but you remove that natural bond that we have, that zika, as a yevama. But he doesn't want it to cancel the mimer. He wants it to cancel the zika. What happens then? Is or the mamora, he said, I want this to cancel the mimer, but not the zika. You would think, what's the problem then? I gave her a mimer, I write to get to cancel the mimer, and the zika remains the way it is. So interesting question. Now, how do we understand the mimer? The Torah already made a bond. If you hold Yesh Zika, the Torah already made a bond between her and you, between, let's say, Leah, Reuben's wife, and Shimon. So what does the Maimer achieve? So we can learn the Maimer two ways. One way is Maimer Ili Zika Karam. What the Maimer does is it strengthens that bond that you already, the existing bond, that pre-existing bond, by adding solution, it strengthens it. Okay. So now, if you just said, I want to divorce, I'm giving you a get, I only wanted to affect the Maimer part of it, or I only wanted to affect the Zika part of it, it's like you're divorcing half a wife. And a divorce for half a wife is not valid. If a havlik and Megadish Chatzisha half a wife, and Megadish Chatzisha last school is doing it. That's why we look at it. Oidim, we say no. The Maimer is totally unrelated to the Zika. The Zika is from the Torah, the Maimer is your initiative, and therefore you can cancel the Maimer. Or Dilma, or do you say they're both two separate things, and therefore the get can you can cancel whatever you want to cancel. So, for example, if you wrote that the get should remove the zika, I want the mimer to remain in place, then it's also to anybody to marry her because she's still attached to Shimon. And by giving her a get, and you said, I want the zikah to be removed, she no longer has any connection to any of the other brothers. So none of the other brothers can marry her because you removed the zikah. And he cannot marry her anymore because by removing this, by giving giving her a get, basically it's Asher Lo Yivna. Clearly showed that he has no interest in marrying her. And if he, let's say, gave a get to remove the maimah, but the zikr remains in place, then all the other brothers can marry, except him. He can't marry, but everyone else could marry her. Why? Because whatever the maimah he put on, he took away. So therefore, they can all marry her. And the zikrs were there before. So which one is it? So why don't you resolve the Rabbi? The Rabbi said, Nosan get lemamoroi. So what happens if there was two brothers? There were two Yevamim. What happened like this? Reuben, Shimon, Levi, they were married to 3 women. And Reuben died. And came along Shimon, and Leah left behind a wife, Leah. Came along Shimon and gave her a maimon. So Shimon now was married to Rachel and gave a maimon to Leah. They're not related to each other. And then Shimon died. So now Levi cannot marry both of them because partially there's 2 wives. You cannot marry 2 wives from one brother. She cannot, and nor can he marry. Can you just give one of them a chalitza? Because Reuben could be that the one you gave a maimon to is really Reuben's wife, and as Reuben's wife, she needs something as well. It comes from 2 different houses. So therefore, you give them both chalitza, says Rava. And Rava says, if you gave a get to the one you gave a maimon, for example, if Levi gave a get to Reuben's wife, to Leah, and then Shimon gave a get. She gave a maimon to Reuben's wife, and then he gave a get to Reuben's wife, and then Shimon died. So then, since Shimon is no longer involved with Reuben's wife, Shimon only had one wife, right? So she is permitted. She permitted to Levi. Right now that he gave her a get, so Reuben's wife is no longer connected to Shimon, is no longer considered the zikah of two Yevamim. So therefore, we see clearly from here that they're considered like 2 separate people. That what did the get do? The get released Reuben's wife and disconnected Reuben's wife from Shimon. So now Shimon's wife, the co-wife, the Tzara, is totally permitted to Levi. So what does he mean? Nosa get lemamora by giving a get. By Shimon giving a get to Reuben's wife. So now she's no longer connected to Shimon. So Shimon's wife, the wife now can marry Laban. Hutu tzarasa l'Rava, she permitted to Rava. So what does he clear from there? That the get, if you give a get to a maimer, the maimer is completely released, and the Shimon's wife is permitted. So we see there's 2 independent things. You asked the question whether the maimer is just an amplification of the zika, or it's 2 separate things. Clearly, it's 2 separate things. So the zika remains intact. Shimon's wife can marry Levi, and we just removed the maimon from Reuben's wife. Says Gemara, you're right. Rava Taka knew that, was convinced that that's the halacha. Hanani was questioning the Teiku. Good question. Then we're going to go through the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, what happens if cholatz, first you did chalitza, and then you went ahead and you did a maimon. So it says that what you cannot after chalitza ein achrei klum. What do you mean? Because now there's a lot to live with her. So if you went ahead and did a maimer, the kedushin are not teifus. Why? Because Rabbi Kiva holds that kedushin are not teifus, but chayavi lavit. Chacham hold they are teifus. If you hold they're not. So obviously this Mishnah follows Rabbi Kiva because it says ein achrei klum. There's nothing you can do afterwards. There's no connections anymore. Only what else? Rabbi Kiva. This is what Rabbi Kiva. They make kedushin teifus chayavi lavit. He holds that kedushin are not teifus when there's an isa lav. Avo chacham leimu yesh achrei klum. Chacham hold that no. It's only a chayv elav, the condition is teifus. Says the Gemara, how can you say the author of Mishnah Kiva? We have another issue here, but Rabbi Kiva doesn't agree with you on Mishnah Paskin. So what is that? But funny Reisha, says that Reisha. What happens if Nosan get, you gave a get, and then some Maimon says that Reisha gave her a get, which means you can no longer marry her because Ashula Yivna Bais, and then you gave her a Maimon. So we say you need 2 things. You need a get for that maimah you gave, and you still need a chalitza to sever your ties. The problem is, Rabbi Kiva holds that once you gave a get, the maimah has no validity. So Rabbi Kiva the yovel get mi mahani b'maimah. How can maimah help? It says in the Mishnah, if you gave her a get, then you did a maimer. But Rabbi Akiva holds that if you gave her a get, that's it. You severed your ties completely, and therefore you can't rejuvenate it through a maimer. But Tanya, if you give a get to your sister-in-law, she's forbidden to you forevermore. You can never marry her. She never says, oh, if Shimon was married to a woman and then divorced her, she married somebody else. He cannot take her back. And the expression of the pasuk is, Shimon, the first husband, cannot that sent her away, take her back. Now, why does Achashach have to send her away? It's obvious what we're talking about. Sometimes just by sending her away, you cannot take her back, even if she didn't marry anybody else. What is that? By Yevama. By Yevama, if you gave her a get, you could no longer take it back. And our Mishnah said you could. If you gave her a get, you could do a maimer afterwards, which means our Mishnah is not Rabbi Akiva. Get Yevamim D'Rabbanan. That din of Rabbi Akiva is only D'Rabbanan. Even after you gave a get, we don't recognize the get, and therefore you could do a maimer. And that pasuk is only a smachta. The cross smachta b'amla. Tanim we learned. Amar Rebbe said, Ein hadvorim halalu. Ein hadvar lalamurim eladiv Rabbi Akiva. Our mission is talking about according to Rabbi Akiva that after chalitza there's a lav for the brother-in-law to live with her, and therefore the kedusha are not teifus. Rabbi Akiva is the one who holds that. There's a chalitza ke'erba. He treats a chalitza just like an erba, just like we say an erba. If you give a kedusha erba, there's no kedusha, there's no effect. So the efficacy. The same thing applies to a chayav ilav according to Rabbi Akiva. They hold after chalitza lav, you could have an impact if you give a kedusha. Then he said, I still have a compromise. Masai, when do we say that is that there is an effect that one after you gave her chalitza, you decide to marry her. So it's a lav there, but kedushin is chal by a lav. If you married her and thinking that you are marrying her, you think it's a mitzvah still involved, there's a mitzvah of yibum, you think that after chalitza there's still a mitzvah of yibum, then ain't acha chalitza klum. Then you achieve nothing because you went with the wrong intention. Tanya learned elsewhere, but I said, let's say you gave chalitza to Yevama and then you decided to marry her. Rebbe says, eat the same thing. Im kitchel l'shamisha, the intention was stamped to marry as a wife, which is illegal, but the kedusha is chal. You need a get. If you think that there's still somehow some kind of strings attached to yibum, ain't tzriche men a get. You don't need a get anymore because it's wrong, as Gemara will explain. The Chachamim say, "Peinche kitchel l'shamishes." Peinche kitchel l'shamishes. I don't care what the reason is. Tzriche men a get. Even if you did a yivama, you still need a get because it's only a lab and it's chal. Now, what exactly is a svara of Rebbe? Why is Rebbe hold that in certain cases you don't need to get anymore if you had a mind Yevamos? We're going to have a number of explanations on the Gemara explaining the machlekes of Rebbe the Chachamim. So here comes explanation number one. I'm going to be my time with Rebbe. The problem with Rebbe is very simple: that he didn't have the right kavanah. He thought that he was doing the yibum, and in fact, it wasn't. It was isha. So he had the wrong kavanah, and that's what doesn't work. Now, how do you know if you have the wrong kavanah? It doesn't work. We have from a commercial law. That is, if a ger passes away, he has all of his assets. There are no ownership. There's no ownership to his assets. It's basically ownerless. Hefker. Anybody can take it. So what happens if, let's say, a ger's estate was contiguous to mine, and I was plowing through my estate. I didn't realize it was actually his estate. So I was doing a kinya chazaka, which technically I should have been kind of his property, but I didn't have a mind to be kind. I thought it was my property. The din is I'm not kind. So the same thing over here. He thought that by right he should marry because of Yevama, and therefore, and it wasn't so. And he didn't have a mind to marry as an ordinary woman, and therefore nothing happened. That's what basis has been. Obviously, it might have it to be a super, like, yes, if somebody plowing through the chassan again, because somebody thought it was his, like, not kind. I'm going to be dummy. How can you compare the two? Over there, you had no intention of acquiring anything at all. I thought I'm plowing in my own field. I had no intention of acquiring. Over here, you had an intention of being Makadash, but the wrong intention. You thought it was Yevama, it was Felicia's. How do you know it doesn't work in this case? How can you compare? They had no intention at all to be kind. In fact, you know what you compare this to? I thought that it belonged to this gear. It turned out to belong to somebody else's gear, another gear. So I had a mind to be kind, but I had the wrong person in mind. And then there is the kind, you are kind. So everyone should agree that if you had a mind that she should be Yevama, that you said you're marrying Yevama, she should be kind because you had a mind to be kind. Hello, what about you? I'll tell you what's going on here. My skin and the vary, the words are going to be a little bit. Here we're talking about going to Amma law. He said to her, Hiskachi li, I want you to be Makudish to me after the Chalitza, be Maimer Yevamin, with a Maimer like by Yevamin. but you already gave chalitza. Rebbe saw Maimer. What's Maimer? Maimer, all Maimer is to support and amplify the zikah. But there is no zikah, there is no bond anymore because you gave chalitza, and therefore there's no Maimer. And that's why he said nothing happened. Chachamim say that no, that the Maimer is totally unrelated to chalitza. So even though chalitza is no longer any bond of a yibum, but a Maimer like any other kedusha. And why? Therefore it's chal. God, I'm asking chalitza because the zikah, the chalitza can no longer remove the whole zikah. But Abana Sabri, each is separate. The card in the beginning, in the outset. Ilu Amala is actually b'mayim yivam. If he would have said from the outside, I want you to kudish me b'mayim yivam, like Mahani wouldn't help. He's hashtanami Mahani. So here too, a maimer, even though there was a chalitza, a maimer helps because it's totally independent of yibum. Rava says, no, I disagree. I'll give you another shot. Everyone will agree that if he said the word maimer, yivam is totally maimer is independent from zikah, and therefore everyone would agree that it would be valid. You know why Rebbe says here after chalitza nothing happened? All it is allowed the kedusha should be chal. He said to his kachli bezikas yivam. He used the word zika. He didn't say maimer. Maimer is independent from zika. If a maimer would work, he used the word zika. So Rebbe said there is no zika anymore. Therefore, there's no kedusha. So what's the svara of the chachamim? Rebbe holds yes zika. Rebbe holds that there is zika. And therefore, Rebbe holds that there is zika. If chalitza comes on chalitza, zika. There is zika, right? Came on the chalitza. He holds generally that there's a zika natural bond between Reuben's wife and Shimon automatically. Remember, he had a machlekes the zika. Not Rebbe holds there is zika. Came on the chalitza and removed that zika. And now you come along and you say zika's yevamim. What's zika? There is no zika. But however, the Rabban hold ain't zika mikara. Rabban hold that there is no. Rabban hold there's no zika. Sorry, zika. There's no zika at all. They don't believe in the whole concept of zika. But me kara, let's say from the beginning, before he gave chalitza, Ila Malavuda said to her, "He's actually bezikas yivam." If you would have said, "I want you to kudish me the zikas yivam," before he gave chalitza, me loy mahani wouldn't help, even though there is no zika. It's just words. It's hashtanami mahani. Even though he gave chalitza, there's no zika. There never was zika, so therefore it works. Rav Shravi says that the chalitza ksheida. Rav Shravi said, "Never been a proper chalitza." If let's say he's like if he would have said zika's yavamin, everyone agrees it doesn't help because there is no zika now. After chalitza, there's no zika anymore because he passed the there is zika came with chalitza and canceled. There's no zika anymore. But you know what we're talking about over here? The chalitza psula. Sorry, Shavi said chalitza ksheida. Eat amla is actually the zika yavamin kulam zika lemahani. Everyone knows it doesn't work. Because there used to be a zika, now there's no zika anymore after the chalitza. If you're arguing by a chalitza psula, for example, you gave her a get and then you gave her chalitza. Because you gave her a get, you sort of reduced your ties, and the chalitza therefore was a weak chalitza because it only has to remove those weaker ties, and that's called a chalitza psula. And so Rabbanan hold Marsav a chalitza psula paiteres. The Rabbanan hold, Rebbe holds that a chalitza psula also removes any connection whatsoever, and therefore, if you do afterwards, nothing happened. Marsav chalitza psula ain't a paiteres, and what do you call it? And the Rabbanan hold that a chalitza psula does not pater, does not because it's a weak chalitza. Because you already reduced the ties, and it's a weak chalitza because you cannot marry. A chalitza they cannot marry is a weak chalitza as well. Because it's a weak chalitza, therefore there's still a little few ties remain afterwards, and that's why maimer is kainah. Rabashi says, everyone knows the chalitza psula does not pater you completely because there's still a little bit zika left. But what you know the argument here is, can you make a condition by chalitza? He says to her, "I will give you, I'll give you a chalitza on the condition, give me $100." And what happens if she doesn't give $100? Is the chalitza valid? I'm going to do a chalitza right now, but I want $100 in a month, and she never gave it. Is the chalitza valid or not? Can you make it tonight or not? Marsava yesh tonight b'chalitza. There is a tonight. Rebbe holds that there's no tonight by chalitza. There's no tonight. So therefore, the chalitza about chalitza. There's no more zika. No more zika. How can you go ahead and marry her now? The Chachamim say no, that there is a Tanai b'chalitza, therefore the chalitza never happened, and therefore they're connected. Rebbe holds there's no Tanai b'chalitza, therefore the chalitza was a valid chalitza, and therefore there's no longer any connection between the two. You can't make a maimer. Chacham hold that there is no Tanai. Chacham hold that there is a Tanai b'chalitza, therefore the chalitza is not valid. They're still connected. In halacha, we say that actually there is no Tanai b'chalitza. Rabbeinu says kuli amishna chalitza. That's difficult because the halacha there's no Tanai b'chalitza. We have Gemara Nazir of Yeralav, and Marksuvas that we learned from the Tanaim from Bnei Gad and Reuven how you're supposed to make a condition. And the rule is that anything that cannot be done with a shliach, he cannot make a Tanai. And since a chalitza he cannot do it through a shliach, he cannot do it through a Tanai. So it's problematic. This little Gemara here, places here, another trying to point out. Ravina says, Kul Yama, everyone holds yesh Tanai b'chalitza. That's even more difficult. That everyone holds there is a Tanai b'chalitza. But over here, but Tanai kafel committed. We know that by Bnei Gad and Reuven they made a double Tanai. If you proceed and you follow the Tanai, you will get everything. But if you don't fulfill the Tanai, you get nothing. You need to go. I guess, point out and highlight the positive and the negative in order to be able to cancel the activity that they did. So this is the argument whether you require Tanai kafel or not. And we're talking about a case where there was a Tanai by the chalitza, which is valid, but it wasn't a Tanai kafel. Ma'asava being you require Tanai kafel because it wasn't a Tanai kafel. The chalitza proceeds with that's ready. We go ahead with the chalitza. We go ahead with the chalitza. It completely cancels any relationship. It cancels a relationship. Therefore, the maimer doesn't work. Ma'asava like being Tanai kafel. And the other one says you don't need a Tanai kafel. Therefore, the chalitza because you don't need a Tanai kafel. It's a valid Tanai. The chalitza hasn't happened yet because you didn't fulfill the Tanai, and therefore they're still connected, and the maimer is effective. We'll stop here. Have a good day.